There's a strange phenomena occurring where people have gone missing in our national parks. Some are showing up alive days later with no memory of what happened to them. Others have simply vanished without a trace. And some have even shown up in places where searchers had already looked for them. Many believe that the parks themselves are covering up these strange and mysterious disappearances. And if that's the case, why would they do such a thing? All of this and more on today's episode of Edge of Wonder.
Welcome to Edge of Wonder, and I'm Ben.
And I'm Rob.
So this one, we're getting a lot of comments asking us about it, and one of our fans, Stephanie Farlow, actually posted something to my Facebook page, which inspired more people joining in who all wanted to know what was going on.
So Ben and I didn't know too much about this. I mean, we heard of it, but it wasn't completely on our radar since we have been really focused on the deep state. So we started to look into it, and man, let me tell you guys, the more we looked into this, the stranger it got. And like everything else, it has got the Illuminati written all over it.
Yeah, but to give you an example of the strangeness of this, there was one case where a little boy whose body was found lying on a fallen tree. But the unexplained aspect of this is that the trail searchers walked through and searched this entire area for days, and then suddenly the body just shows up out of nowhere.
So in another case, a 2-year-old child was missing, and after a couple of days it was really misty and the search dogs started to act really strange, and out of nowhere the little girl came walking out of the mist completely naked and scared to death, but couldn't say what happened to her. They thought she was with a large animal which somehow protected her.
So recently there was a documentary called Missing 411, based on a series of books written by David Paulides, who had more than 20 years experience in law enforcement, including the SWAT team and the street crimes unit on the San Jose Police Department.
Paulides started to get involved in missing persons cases after a government employee went to go see him for help. When Paulides heard the stories, it only brought up more intrigue and mystery into these disappearances with even more unanswered questions.
Soon, Paulides started dedicating his life to understand these mysterious disappearances. And mystery just doesn't cut it. I mean, this is getting into real-life Stranger Things here. And Paulides even started to think in this direction.
During a talk at the University of Toronto, Paulides said it was, quote, "It's like something out of the X-Files." So this isn't just some paranormal hobbyist. This guy seriously has dedicated his life to help figure out and understand what is happening with these missing person cases. He also collected over 2,000 cases that have similar mysterious characteristics.
To date, Paulides has some 2,000 missing cases documented related to national parks. But this is where the weirdest part comes in. There is no requirement from our government to keep a national record for people who go missing on federal land.
Why?
That's the big question that everybody is asking. But if you count the missing people in the US as a total, it's a whopping 650,000 people just in 2017. I mean, this is not even remotely funny. I mean, it's crazy.
Of course, that also counts parents abducting their own children to avoid child support. But this is a huge number. But for the 1,600, which some say is a very low estimate, has missing people range from all ages and are all ends of the spectrum when it comes to age and mental capacity. I mean, some have mental problems and some are actually extremely brilliant and accomplished people.
Even when the movie Missing 411 requested this information, they were told that there were no records, and to deliver one would cost the production company $1.4 million, which was probably more than the film cost to make.
So the other interesting fact is that the Secretary of Interior is the person who oversees the U.S. national parks, right? He's appointed by the president. So Ken Salazar held this position during Obama's first term and was interviewed by the Missing 411 film crew.
He was asked if there was any public records, and he just said, "I don't recall."
Sure.
Right. And when we were watching this, I thought it was odd that the only thing in this room was a telescope pointing at a building for some reason. And look what was named on the telescope.
Saturn. If you haven't watched our Saturn videos, probably want to go do that now. So now that's just the name of the company, but it is kind of odd that that's the only thing in the room. Maybe the film crew left this in on purpose. I mean, having the telescope named Saturn might just be a coincidence, but this isn't normal to have this being the only thing in there. I mean, is it?
Pointing at building? I don't know. Anyway, now when Ken was asked about records kept, he said there is no record keeping of searches, which seems very stupid because, I mean, how would you ever know what worked or what didn't work or what find patterns for the future searches or, I mean...
That just screams red flag, right? Also, it would be very easy to hide things, so no reports need to be filed or written up. But let's get into some of these super weird cases.
So according to Politis, many of these cases are clustered in certain areas, particularly around bodies of water in national parks. If the people are found alive, they often have memory loss. If they are found dead, the cause of death is hard to determine.
The people are often found in an area it seems they could not have reached by foot, such as on steep rocky cliffs, or they're found in a location that has already been thoroughly searched.
People are often missing clothes and shoes, and search and rescue dogs are strangely unable to pick up the scent. Politis said at the University of Toronto, some canine handlers have told Politis their search dogs act strangely, walking in little ways, circling, and then sitting down.
Now, many people claim that dangerous wildlife are the causes of these disappearances, but there is never any mauled bodies. Tracks from animals, clothes ripped from an animal, or blood anywhere.
Also, not to mention, in the last 100 years, there's only been 14 fatal mountain lion attacks in the US and Canada combined. So this doesn't hold up at all. The other aspect is that a family member or parents killed a child or person.
Yeah, you'd think there'd be way more mountain lion attacks in Canada. Canada's like mountain lion jungle, I think. Just kidding. So I'm sure that in some cases this is sad, but most law enforcement agencies usually come about and rule out the parents. But there's one family who's being accused, but when you listen to their testimony and the fact that they've been out every day since their son was missing...
Yeah, it just doesn't add up.
No.
Yeah. The issue is that people want answers, so they start pointing fingers to fill this gap. But there are also so many things that the parks are covering up that this is why we think the deep state is involved.
For example, there is no federal standards for terrestrial search and rescue, according to Robert Koister, author of the Search and Rescue Guidebook, Lost Person Behavior. So again, this means that rules and regulations are loose on national parks.
But okay, let's get into some of these cases.
The edge of wonder.
So in one case back in 1952, 2-year-old Keith Parkins walked around the family barn and suddenly disappeared. 200 people were called to his rescue when his family couldn't find him. They searched everywhere.
Hours after he was missing, and 3 miles as the crow flies of his last location, a small amount of tracks from a toddler were found. They started out of nowhere and seemed to end nowhere as well.
19 hours later, his body was finally found laying face down in the snow another 8 miles away, which was in a dense area on top of a very rocky cliff. His father picked him up and realized he was still breathing with scratches on his face. Some of his clothes were found lying around him.
He ended up being okay, but never could remember what happened or how he was able to walk through 12 miles of snow and tough, dense terrain in 19 hours while only 2 years old. I mean, it seems most logical that you would just go back to the barn.
Another eerie fact is that most of the missing persons are often found in bodies of water, but they didn't die of drowning, almost as if their body was placed there.
Jelani Brinson, a 24-year-old college soccer star whose body was found in a golf course pond in Anoka, Minnesota. He went missing from a friend's home in 2009. Investigators found his hat in one backyard nearby and his shoes in another.
But this is the unbelievable part. It had been raining for days previously, and the golf course was really muddy. Brinson's socks were completely clean, so he was placed in the pond by either someone or something.
Also, Politis said that he didn't drown. The cause of his death remains undetermined to this day.
In January 2014, in Whitby, Ontario, Jeffrey Boucher went missing after going out for a morning run and never came back. His wife said that he would come home, change his clothes, kiss her goodbye, and head to work.
His MP3 player, some running clothes, his glasses, and wedding band were all missing. Soon everyone was out looking for him. Police ruled out suicide and any foul play from his wife.
Police found $3,500 in a desk at the school that he taught, but the school officials said that he was collecting this money for a ski trip with his wife.
Months later, his body washed up on shore at Lake Ontario, but the weird thing is, according to Politis, his body was frozen, but the lake wasn't. Also, a book came out saying it was a suicide, yet no evidence ever suggested it was.
One of the more recent and disturbing disappearances is Dior Coons Jr., which is also the main family featured in Missing 411, and one that has gotten the most attention from all news outlets and law enforcement agencies.
Dior was just 2.5 years old when he vanished at Timber Creek Campground near Leadore, Idaho. His parents, Jessica Mitchell and Dior Kuntz Sr., asked him if he wanted to go with them, but he said he wanted to stay with his grandfather, so we walked back over to him.
His grandfather said that he saw him, and then he went inside the trailer for about 10 minutes, and when he came back out to fish with his friend Isaac Renoir, Dior came running up asking where little Dior was. No one knew, and that was when the panic set in.
Jessica and Dior Sr. got in their car to find a signal for their phone to call for help, because there was no signals near that area. They got through, and then the madness set in with the media. Search teams came, and then they started accusing the parents, all while going through the nightmare of actually losing your child.
They started to give press conferences, but soon quit talking to the media, which then gave rise to all kinds of speculations that they were the ones that did it, or maybe it was Isaac, the friend, or the grandfather. The family finally hired a private investigator, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And now this private investigator is about to release his own videos in October and interviews that he had with these parents. And it seems like he's about ready to blame the parents for their son's disappearance.
However, watching Missing 411, they explained that the media was twisting and misquoting them.
Yeah, no surprise there.
So that's why they stopped and spent their whole weekends and their own money still searching for their son. They're not giving up hope.
So this just doesn't add up. The issue is people want answers, so they start pointing fingers to fill this gap that is filled with mystery. But there are also so many things that the parks are covering up, and this is why we think the deep state is involved.
Somehow involved.
Yeah, somehow involved.
There hasn't been a single trace of clothes, bones, footprints. Nothing has been found, which makes this really bizarre and gives rise to a lot of speculation. The family believes he was abducted somehow.
The only thing ever found was by Jessica, which was a shovel which had a blonde hair on it. But when the team moved it, the wind blew it and it was never found again.
Now, we wanted to look a little bit into this private investigator. He said he quit, but the family said they fired him. What's interesting is that there are a few sites dedicated to call him out on fraud charges, such as this site, Via View Files, and another one insinuating he has over 50 lawsuits against him.
Yeah, so.
Might want to do your research before hiring an investigator next time.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's got really some credibility on his websites and stuff, but when you look into his name, these things popped up. But some of these go way back, such as 6-year-old Lillian Carney, who disappeared in 1897. She was picking blueberries, and by the way, many reports say people go missing picking fruit, with her parents when she just was not there.
They searched for over an hour and finally got more people to help, and by morning over 200 people were searching. The following day over 300 people were looking for her. And that is a lot of people back in 1890 helping out since, of course, phones didn't exist.
So they finally found her after days out of nowhere, and she couldn't remember anything that happened. But the weirdest part is she said it was daylight the entire time that she was missing.
So entire time, how long?
It was like 48 hours.
Oh, daylight the entire time?
Daylight the entire time.
Where was she, the North Pole?
Time slip? This is
bizarre.
Yeah, this is why everyone's questioning these things. So let's go into conclusion. What is happening? Well, the more we research this, the more connections we found, and in one case was so shocking to us that from this we knew that this has to be a cover-up.
But the question is, if it's a cover-up, for what? But this is where the truth becomes stranger than fiction, because these cases don't follow normal patterns. You need to expand your thinking to all possibilities.
In Politis' own words, folks, I have never given you a theory. I have given you a series of facts. What happens if I come out and tell you it's that, and then the next day somebody comes out and proves it can't be that? My credibility is shot.
Now, when you dig, you start realizing Politis talks about the paranormal a lot outside of the mainstream realm. And one common theme, and rather hard to accept for the average person, would be aliens. No, don't laugh yet.
Yeah, we're not talking about little green men coming from the sky and abducting people. This would be a very highly organized, top secret cabal type facilities that we're talking about here. We already know by talking to so many insiders that secret military bases do exist.
Also, the search teams seem to be covering up evidence, and what really is the job of the Secretary of Interior? To assist or cover up? And who knows if there are bases under these parks?
But we'll get into all the details of this and the most mysterious missing persons case we found in our next episode.
Also, we said earlier that 650,000 people missing alone in just the US last year. Millions of people around the world go missing, and what is happening? We get into this in the next show as well.
But we don't like leaving on a negative note. You guys might be wondering, well, what can we do?
Well, for starters, don't go wandering off in parks, or especially national parks, alone. Take GPS devices with you, stay together, and pay attention to your surroundings. Bring water and food. Also, make sure you know the people you're with.
If you need to report something, it is better to call your local police. And if you have some information on someone or you know something, you can call Crime Stoppers. Try to stay calm. When you are calm, you can kind of think things a little more clearly, but I mean, it's kind of hard to stay calm in some of these cases if someone does go missing. But
also, we know this sounds kind of bad, but don't just blindly trust everyone you meet. Do your own research too, but seriously, if the parks release the number of missing people, all of us would likely be afraid to go there alone, which is probably why they don't do this.
All right, you guys, so what did you think of our episode of Missing People?
Yeah, please hit like and subscribe if you like this content so we can keep producing more of it for you guys. And until next time, we'll see you out
on the edge. And stay tuned definitely for our next one, which will blow your minds how crazy it gets.
Indeed.
One of the more recent and disturbing disappearances, sorry.
Disturbing disturbances?
Yeah, disturbing disappearances